done thanks to the feedback effect. The feedback effect works only in one way. That's yesterday's conclusion. Now on the price formation of capital goods, or the producer goods if you like, the process is similar, except that some theorems need to be reformulated slightly differently. Now, please note that in the formation of, or in the market of capital goods, there is vertical arbitrage. We've discussed this at length, but it takes place between several levels of the market. And the market of goods destined for the end user, the consumer that is at the lowest level. It is closest to the consumer. Now, under an unadulterated gold standard, this consumer would be paying for gold for his purchases. I'm saying that because this is, after all, a course concentrated on the use of gold and why it should be. But this doesn't detract from the laws and the theorems that are formulated here. Because with paper money, you also at the bottom, you need to pay for your goods. The producer of these goods, and these goods that are in high demand by the consumer, all these goods need some kind of machinery, some kind of capital goods, some kind of input, and not only machinery, to arrive at the end product. Obviously, you don't get that at the bottom level. You will go to a higher level to acquire all these inputs. I have to add that the use of the word product is also meant to include a service. For instance, a haircut is a service, as menial as it is, but it is in demand with the consumer, at least some consumers. Some females are higher demand. So to arrive at a haircut, you would need several ingredients, one of which is a skilled barber, probably some scissors, what have you. Now note that the role of the producer of these products and services is the one who is least remote from the ultimate paying consumer, and his role is dominant. The role of the producer at a higher level of the scissors, his role is more remote from the person who needs the haircut, and his role is subordinate. Seems obvious, but it is. This principle is not the principle of sovereignty, it is called, well, the principle of imputation. Now, if we extend the marginal analysis, what we have been doing the last few days, we can extend that fairly easily to the price formation of any good, the nth order of goods. It's a bit of an abstraction, of course. And we can say that the asked price, in this case, is the outcome, as usual, of competition of the user of the nth order good, doing some horizontal arbitrage with one-legged straddles, as you know. If we have to do this in more detail, the asked price of an nth order of good X marks the point where, as you know, the opportunity cost of buying an additional unit of X becomes critical to the marginal user of X. He is the first among the producers of goods of the order below that in refusing to buy the uptick. Because, in view of his opportunity to buy a substitute, he can say, well, I don't want a haircut in this place, I'll go with the haircut with the French guy around the corner. His style is better, whatever. The bid price of an nth order good is the outcome of competition of producers doing vertical arbitrage between goods of order n and n plus one level higher, in this case using a two-legged straddle, If we take this in more detail, the bid price of the nth order good is the point where the opportunity cost of, now for a producer, selling an additional unit becomes critical to the marginal marginal producer, in view of his opportunity in refusing to sell. In refusing to buy the producer goods that go as an input. If we make this less abstract, we can use a tractor, for instance. Inputs for the output can be sourced from different suppliers. The farmer is the user of the tractor, and the tractor manufacturer, he would buy what? Steel, glass, seats, engines, tires, hydraulics. I'm not even. There's thousands probably of pieces that go into a tractor, but they are purchased at a higher level, and the manufacturer, choosing at a higher level, he can choose his supplier. He's doing this horizontal arbitrage at one level higher. So we can recapitulate this using tires. I think tires are a good example. Tires are the nth good, and the asked price of a tractor tire of the brand Continental, for instance, marks the point where the opportunity cost of buying an additional set of Continental tires becomes critical to the tractor manufacturer by the name of whatever, John Deere. And there are several tractor manufacturers. Now he is the first among this group of tractor producers in refusing to buy the uptick in Continental tires in view of his opportunity to buy a substitute from Pirelli. He got a better deal at Pirelli, and they threw in a little trip to Italy. So, yeah, why not? That's free market. The other side is the bid price. We've just done the ask price. The bid price of the Continental tractor tires is, of course, the outcome of the competition of producers of tires, doing vertical arbitrage between, well, rubber supplies, steel supplies, whatever goes into a tire. And the bid price of Continental tires marks the point where the opportunity cost of selling an additional set of Continental tires to the tractor manufacturers becomes critical to the marginal producer of these tires in view of his opportunity in refusing to buy rubber from his supplier, his usual supplier, and choosing to switch to, well, I don't know, another supplier, I suppose. That is what vertical arbitrage is all about. We've described the theorems, we've made them a bit more from the theoretical to the practical. There are a few other things that need to be said also. It is in fact not uncommon for certain goods to be at certain different levels. And I've taken diamonds as an example because they are at the level of the consumer. I don't need to explain that, I suppose. But they're also at a higher level. Diamonds are used mainly, in fact, in abrasive products. You can find them in abrasive material, but also in drills and in industrial drills and industrial machines. And the bulk of diamonds is sold for that purpose. Not all diamonds can be 1.5 carat, absolutely very fine quality blue colored diamonds. You would separate them from your lot of diamonds that are not used in abrasive products, and you would sell them obviously in the market for the consumer. Now, using diamonds, I can just as well say that you can use coal and platinum. They both have different levels at which you can use them. They can be used in consumption, they can be used in industrial applications. Whenever a product is in fact both at two different levels, the mth and the nth order of goods, we may assume that as far as the formation of the asked price and the bid price also, they each take place at a different level. So there's not one, they each take place at a different level, but if there is a tradable difference between those end levels, and you can feel me coming here, there's a tradable spread. You can fill in the blanks, of course, arbitrage and arbitrageurs will come in and close that spread. Before the smartest of you will say, hey, there is an exception, I will of course gladly say there is an exception. That is in the forward market. Trading companies, copper traders, not diamond traders, but trading companies in general, they have usually forward sales contracts, and not only trading companies. If I think of, for instance, a Carrefour or a Tesco, or think of your own country, these giant suppliers of consumer goods. They all sell vegetables. Don't think they buy them all in one central place. The Carrefour does order locally from the local farmers, and they even have forward contracts. Same goes for mining companies, and in this case of the diamonds, mining company De Beers, for instance, sells its diamonds, as far as I know, 10 times a year on auctions. These auctions are attended by a hand-picked number of preferred dealers who are well oiled. But you can say also copper traders. Copper traders may be not only using the inputs and they may be doing some proprietary trading, and they trade for their own account. But a trader in copper and a trader in any commodity basically has one essential element for him would be his access to product, of course. And in obtaining access to product, be that copper, be that diamonds, he would need basically forward contracts. Now he would probably build up a reputation, which is also an asset, because as a trader you need to have the reputation of being a very reliable counterparty. Otherwise you will be blown out of the water, and nobody will come to you to either purchase or sell stuff to you if you're not a reliable trader. Traders have intangible assets like a reputation, for instance. Now, industrial users of platinum and coal and diamond and all sorts of commodities, they would be contractually prevented from reselling their inventory that they've purchased again on the same market. Of course, that would preempt all the efforts. There would be no purpose then. But needless to say that these forward contracts would be beneficial under certain circumstances to all the suppliers who would seek some form of security because they don't know the future, to a degree. Now, I said that we picked up the pace. We've been 10 minutes into this expose. And this concludes, in fact, the topic on price formation of capital goods. We've seen how vertical arbitrage is done on different levels, where the tractor manufacturer sources all his products and has at each level the opportunity to do some horizontal arbitrage and look for different suppliers. We now have a finished product, we now have a finished tractor, it's a beautiful tractor that is ready for the end user. The consumer of a tractor would obviously be not you and me, it would be a farmer. We can now explain that the ask price of a tractor is formed by the competition of the farmers bidding for the price of the tractor. The ask price in this case is of course the sticker price in the showroom of the John Deere tractor dealership. Now, the sticker price of a tractor is not an example that I've used arbitrarily, because if you have read the professor's work, it should ring a bell. Anyone? Then I will explain it to you. We've seen now that a tractor manufacturer in capital goods needs lots of inputs, but one of his inputs, which we haven't treated here, and which we are treating now, is capital. He doesn't only need, of course, to purchase tires, and he purchases the services of engineers and manpower to produce it and to put it all together. He also needs capital. He can amass capital himself, but he can also borrow some capital. But even if he has amassed some capital of his own, it comes at a price. If it's his own capital, it comes at the price of the opportunity cost of investing it somewhere else, possibly with a higher return. But one of the ingredients of an entrepreneurship is capital. And let's not forget that capital having a price too, it has, of course, as we know by now, two prices, which is a bid and ask. Now, in what follows, I will from now on discuss the hexagonal model of capital markets. It can be found on the internet, as I've said. But please bear with me, and I have to ask you, if you have questions, please keep them for after the expose, because otherwise we will never arrive here at the formation of interest rates. The formation of interest rates is the price of capital. The price of capital is one of the inputs of this tractor, and it is essential. And I will couple back to the tractor at the end of the expose. The formation of interest rates is what we discuss now, and it is what brought us here. I will refrain from referring to traditional economics, because you can find that out all by yourself, what a mechanism is, how they explain the formation of interest rates. You can find it on Wikipedia, you can leave it there and forget about it. There is one element in all these theories of interest which is not discussed, and it's not even considered in the traditional models, and they cannot even do so either, and it's the time element. Now, anybody who is acquainted with money knows that time is an essential element. So it's unfortunate that the traditional economic models do not use time as an element. They cannot, because they haven't devised the proper tools yet. I say yet because, of course, Professor Fekete has devised it a long time ago. He did not get up one morning and say, okay, which economist can we annoy today? let's invent something that will annoy Paul Krugman. He didn't do so. He has considerable effort and time in devising this model, and it should be exposed to the general public, because this is something I can explain to anybody who asks. The traditional ISLM model, for some of you who have done some economics, I failed that subject.
What does ISLM stand for?
ISLM model.
These are two curves that resemble, the IS curve resembles investments, government spendings, and whatever in an economy, and the LM curve resembles the monetary supply and monetary demand.
Yeah, liquidity and monetary supply. Sandeep, don't worry. Really.
So basically it's like demand and supply, and you just move the curves along the other curve by increasing government spending or decreasing government spending, or increasing money supply or decreasing money supply.
It's in fact a non-starter because it's an equilibrium model from the beginning, and each curve is a collection, is a set of equilibria. Oh, we're compounding the error now. Forget it. This model, the hexagonal model, we start with 4 points because we have to build this up. We start with the square model, and the square model is built around the need to convert income into capital and capital into income. Now, typically, and I've used here the professor's wording also, the annuitant and the annuitant, one with a D and one with a T, but we distinguish between them on the axle where time is expressed. And I've put there time or age to make it a bit more visible. Now, typically, the annuitant with a D would be the younger person who is looking to start a family, and you know, he goes out to work and provides for himself, for his family, put some savings aside for emergencies. Now, that's his role. Now, contrast that to the older person, the retiree who has worked all his life. He has obviously the wealth, and he needs to convert that into income, because at his age working is less of an option, let's say. Whereas the annuitant with a D is of course the younger person. He has no wealth unless inherited or won the lottery or something, in which case he probably quickly lose it. But he needs to build up his capital, and he has income but no wealth, and the annuitant with a T has wealth but no income. That's the problem. How do we exchange that? On the vertical axis I've put interest, not discount, interest, from 0 to whatever the scale may be.
What is CF?
That would be the floor and the ceiling, but that I'll come to that there's two rates of interest. On the one hand, the annuitant, the older person, and I love this word annuitant with a T, sounds much better than retiree. So the annuitant with a T, his need to convert wealth into income can be answered if he, let's refrain from the word investment because, let's use the word investment. He can find a company, an entrepreneur, and give him or enter into a contract with an entrepreneur who is willing to share the extra proceeds that he would make from the capital injection, from the wealth of the annuitant, and in the form of dividends, interest, whatever, it's in financial algebra, it's all the same. It's a cash flow. The cash flow goes back from the entrepreneur to the annuitant with a T. They could enter into a contract. I haven't put a certain interest on that yet, because we will come to that. On the other side of the axle, the younger side, we have the youngster who is still accumulating his wealth. What could he do? Well, in order to save some time and to increase productivity, he could enter into a contract with an inventor. We call him the inventor because this is now the research and development partner. Some of his income he will spend with the inventor to devise some tools for him so he can work faster. He needs a computer, he needs small machinery, so he can produce more labor in one unit of time, and of course that helps in the creation of wealth. They could enter into a contract. Now let's note here that it is the relative position of the top half of this graph, the inventor and the entrepreneur, they would absolutely be at no point or nowhere if there wouldn't be an interest rate. Let's also see here that the people, the annuitant with the T and a D, they have opposing interests, because they would ask the highest possible return for the money they would invest with both the inventor and the entrepreneur, whereas the inventor and the entrepreneur would have the opposing view and say, well, we can't pay that much, we can only afford this much. So they have opposing interests. And in this graph, it's not just any graph. When interests are zero, when there is no real interest, note that the inventor and the entrepreneur cannot survive. Their role is reduced to zero. There's nothing to do for them, because both the annuitant with a T and a D can simply go on with their lives. The one will work and hoard gold as time progresses, and the annuitant with a T, the retiree, can hoard some gold and purchase whatever he needs. So there's hoarding on this side, there's this hoarding on that side. There is no interest rate. They can convert, they can live. But what are the inventor and the entrepreneur going to do? There's, in the absence of interest rates, there's nothing to do for them. Now, the entrepreneur and the inventor are the losers if exchanges would dry up. For them, the zero interest is an insurmountable obstacle to capital formation. Now, this impairment in the bargaining position of these parties can be reduced and can be improved by the services of a fifth protagonist, because up to now we had 4 protagonists. We introduce the fifth protagonist because we pass from the square model now to a pentagonal model, and we introduce another very important person called the capitalist. Just picture this as the marginal entrepreneur and the marginal inventor. Those are the persons who've just missed entering into a contract with the annuitant. they've missed their opportunity of a direct exchange. But that would be a waste, because this, they can still do some more. And they could enter into a partnership between themselves, the inventor and the entrepreneur. If it were not that we need some kind of credit, because we have to bridge time. Because if they do enter into a partnership, this partnership will actually be long of present wealth and short of future wealth. And in as much as the present and the future wealth are not exchangeable, in the absence of credit, this partnership is not viable. Save for some kind of Maecenas who is willing to give credit. He will get his capital back at a later stage. Now the rise of the capitalist is now explained, and it's not explained in terms of exploitation, as one can hear in some corners of political philosophy, but it is explained in terms of services that only a specialist would be able to provide, and these services are of course in demand by the partnership of the marginal entrepreneur and the marginal inventor. And the former is the entrepreneur who has just missed his chance to form a partnership with the annuitant, with a T, and the latter is the inventor who has just missed his chance to form a partnership with the annuitant, with a D. And without the services of this capitalist, their talents would be lost. You will not find this theory anywhere. Don't look for it. Krugman or any other person. Theory up to now doesn't catch up with the Professor Fekete's theory of capital formation here. Now please bear with me, because I will arrive at the sixth protagonist and the formation of interest rates. But we still have not been able to determine a proper rate. Now, if we enter a capitalist, that's a third competitor, or at least it's a competitor who would be bringing down interest rates from high levels. The annuitants on the bottom here would be asking high interest rates. This is history. Before the capitalist entered, what did we have? We had medieval Europe. There were no capitalists, and I'm not restricting myself to Europe, but the fall of the Roman Empire in the 4th century caused heavy damage. People had to survive, and in the time frame of then, the Christian time frame, anything that looked like interest was condemned as usury. Interest rates were, for all intents and purposes, at zero. There was no role for the inventor, the entrepreneur, nor the capitalist. Still, people survived. There were, of course, ways and means, and you will find this in the good book of Huerta de Soto, which is a rather thick book, but well worth a read. Also, if I think back of the Arab world at that time, the Arab world of the 6th century, they had waterworks, they had engineers, and I'm not sure if they had capital. Well, they certainly didn't have capitalists. But they had they inherited this also from the Romans. They were at an advanced stage of development. Yet it's the Western world who developed the idea of the capitalist, and they ran with it. If the Arab world, or I'm not sure about the Far East, about India and China, I'm unable to make any statement on that. But I would say if they had the invention of both double entry bookkeeping and the capitalist, the world would probably be different from what we know now. So the invention of Luca Pacioli's double entry bookkeeping in the 14th century and the capitalist, and I'm referring to the Medici bankers, also merchant bankers, but also capitalists, the roles can be the same, were essential in the development of the Western world. You will not find this in any theory that has been written up to now. But coming back to interest rates and the formation of interest rates, we see here that the need for the formation of an interest rate is far from being fundamental, because we can do with zero interest rates also. So the interest rate, the need for an interest rate arrives at the margin. Those inventors and those entrepreneurs who have been lost out somehow. There is a valid way of bringing down interest rates, and that's to enhance the bargaining power of the partnership of the entrepreneur and the inventor, vis-à-vis, of course, the annuitant and the people on the bottom of the graph here who would be asking far too much. The capitalist is the only actor that can offer competition for this monopoly. As a result of this competition, the rate of interest can be reduced from extremely high levels. And please, note that that can be done without damaging the interests of the annuitants, provided we are on a gold standard. How do you bring this up? There we go. So we have arrived at the final stage, and I think we have about 20 minutes left, which is fine. We have arrived at the final stage of explaining the hexagonal model of capital markets. Hexagonal model means that we have 6 corners, of course. Up to now we had 5. The participants so far were both the annuitant with a D, the annuitant with a T, the entrepreneur, the inventor, and the capitalist. And the last protagonist here in this drama, which we can call the drama of human action, would be the investment banker. The investment banker's function, and I'm referring back to, for instance, the Medici family, but there are several others. His function would be clearing and brokering. His role would be to match various maturities and various demands thrown at him from all other 5 corners here. He is now a specialist. He is the market maker. Market maker in what market? In the gold bond market. This is now where funds are being borrowed from one another at an interest. And when we speak about interest, there are 2 rates of interest. There's a floor and a ceiling rate. And under an unadulterated gold standard, the floor of interest rate, the floor of interests, would be determined by the marginal time preference, and the ceiling rate would be determined by the marginal productivity. Now, let me quickly explain these. I'm going to use the definitions that Professor Fekete has given them. The floor is the rate at which the opportunity cost of holding a bond becomes critical to the marginal bondholder. There is a floor rate of interest. When it goes too low, so at the next downtick in the interest rate, the critical or the marginal bondholder will sell the bond in view of his opportunity to carry wealth in the form of gold, which is a present good. So who is the bondholder? The bondholder is, of course, the bottom here, the annuitant, with a T or a D. Now, the ceiling for the rate, I mean, rates cannot go through the roof either. The ceiling rate of interest is determined by the marginal productivity of capital. Now, that is the rate of the rate at which the opportunity cost of carrying capital stock becomes critical to the marginal entrepreneur. Now, the word entrepreneur is on the board here. So, at the next uptick in the rate of interest, he will sell the stock in view of his opportunity to carry his earning interest in the form of a higher yielding gold bond. So basically, what this is saying is the entrepreneur will say, well, I'm done entrepreneuring, I'm going into bonds. When the interest rate goes too high. Can you follow? Is everybody with me?
It's a lot easier to hold a bond than be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'll say.
Well, it depends. Depends on your mindset, I suppose. So, I mean, rates under a gold standard would be not as high as for every entrepreneur to become a coupon clipper, if we may say so. Rates would be a bit too low for that, but rates are not that low because then, in protest of the too low rates, the annuitants would withdraw their capital from the bond market. Say, bugger this.
There is always arbitrage behind these.
Yes.
I mean, this is just a bird's eye view, so we cannot go into details, but every adjustment is the result of some type of an arbitrage.
Right, and this is where we come back to the role of the investment banker, because Sandeep has touched on the role of bankers in today's society, but under a gold standard, another adulterated gold standard, the role of the investment banker is the market maker. He's the arbitrageur. And he's not the only arbitrageur. I mean, every party in here can do some horizontal arbitrage and some vertical arbitrage. They have the opportunity. So I thought this was important to highlight, because we have been talking about horizontal and vertical arbitrage, of the role of all the protagonists. Now, it has to be said that the very same disequilibrium model that the professor has invented, because I didn't come up with this, it's not my work, I just drew the graph here. This graph I can explain as I said, but I cannot explain any other ISLM curve. It's too difficult. The same model here is also valid with a few adaptations for a fiat-based or a paper-based monetary system. But of course now, what determines the floor rate of interest and what determines the ceiling rate of interest, now we have to develop another theory, because of course it is, as far as the floor rate of interest is concerned, that is now determined by marginal liquidity preferences, which also goes by the name of the yield curve here. And the ceiling rate is also determined by the marginal, but this is now, listen carefully, by the marginal productivity of speculation. And I didn't do this here, but under a fiat-based system, the ceiling and the floor would be wide apart, as we have experienced, as we have seen. Just picture the interest rates between 1980 and now. But you know, you can go much further back, and if you go really further back, you will see that the spreads narrow, coming back to gold standard. And under the gold standard, the spreads would be narrow, but this would be the system that's behind it. No. The reason why I wanted to explain this formation of the interest rate is the following. We have devised carefully the sticker price of our tractor. We know it is the outcome of a bidding process, and there is a brand new tractor in our showroom, and just for argument's sake, we are the 31st of December, and we've taken delivery of a brand new tractor in the showroom, and we push it in. And we are living in reality, so back from the gold standard, we are now in the fiat system, and the next morning, as a gift, if you can say, the president of the Reserve Bank announces another interest rate. Can go up or down, but let's say for argument's sake interest rates are up, 0.25% even, but you may say, well, so what? Not so what. I'll explain you so what. Because the sticker price of that tractor hasn't changed. But what will change is the following. When interest rates rise, and this is without the tractor even moving, all the tractors in your showroom lose value instantly. Interest rates rises, net present value drops. Why have they lost value? It's brand new. Well, no farmer in his right mind will pay the old price, knowing that the contribution of this tool, which is the tractor, and which has a life expectancy of, let's say, 1 million hours, whatever time that is, 1 million working hours, and the contribution to wealth can be divided per hour, per time, that represents a cash flow. And that is limited. That is a given. It doesn't change. Let's assume. Or we don't have to assume it is. That doesn't change. I mean, it's designed to work for 1 million hours. You cannot wish or make that tractor double his lifetime without without pushing up costs. Then that defeats the purpose. So, without any change to this tractor's physical condition, the value has been slashed simply because whatever the cash flow represents that this tractor can do every year, and you can harvest 1 time a year, 3 times a year. Let's assume the weather is no factor because weather conditions are normally distributed. Doesn't matter. You can ignore that. You can only gain X amount of cash flows. But now comes it time. Those cash flows are discounted at the present interest rate to a number, a net present number. No farmer in his right mind will pay more than what this tractor will contribute if he can make from this tractor a single number of 3 million. He would be out of his mind to pay 3.1 million. Less? Yes. More? You crazy. He would be out of pocket. This comes back, coupling back to the sticker price. We know, we've carefully designed the theory, what determines the price of the tractor. Well, the new price of the tractor is determined by the competition of the farmers, the end users, and the present value of future income that buyers expect to derive from its use will determine that price. Since that income is now discounted at a higher interest rate, the new price will have to be lower. That is mathematics. If you fight that, you will end up paying too much. And of course, capital goods, like tractors that have already been deployed in production, they are not spared either, because they also lose value instantly. In fact, if interest rates rise, the net present value of your tractor, which is now, has already used 500,000 of his working hours, will, you continue to use it, but instead of lasting you 20 years or 10 years, it will not last you that long. I mean, you will fail to maintain it because it's not productive at that rate of interest. It will cost you more than it will deliver, making it a bad proposition. And we all know that interest rates can rise, but they also can drop. And you can think, hey, hooray, savior. Unfortunately not. Because the loss of value is in fact irreversible. The loss of value is irreversible because you scrapped your investments. They are not to come back into production. And you probably, as a farmer, you would have scratched your head and said, well, bugger this, I'm going into bonds. I'm not doing any farming anymore. Because sub-marginal capital will actually be withdrawn from production. It will no longer be maintained. And even if interest rates come down later, value is gone. It's evaporated. Just showing that, and I'm still within my time limits, that the carefully designed sticker price of the tractor is all good and well, but please do not forget that these capital goods may be marginalized, and it's out of your control. They're marginalized by interest rates. This is maybe a message that defeats or puts defeatist thoughts into any entrepreneur, but under a gold standard. Luckily, interest rates don't gyrate, and you do not have to worry so much about the sticker price changing at all. I mean, there would be slight variations, but not worth your while. And that is around trip for today. Now, I realize I have picked up the pace. Why is this not moving?
Could you point out the relevance of this to the topic? Don't get discouraged if this was too condensed, because this is really the subject of another course which is coming, not in this session, but in a future session. So this is very, very highly condensed.
Yes.
But Peter brought this in for a reason, and I don't think I have heard the reason why this is relevant to the topic.
This is relevant to the topic of arbitrage, because the role of the investment banker is to match maturities and to match demands from all five corners. And his role is to close the bid-ask spread on the interest, on the interest rates. He can bring down the ceiling. His role and his very existence would bring down interest rates to acceptable levels, and then he can do the necessary arbitrage. He's the market maker. He can purchase at the lowest and sell at the highest. Now, gold bonds have, of course, also two rates, ceiling and floor. But his role is pivotal. Both the capitalist and the investment
sure,
banker.
it's a fine example of arbitrage.
Yes.
But what's the relevance to the price formation of higher order capital goods?
The relevance of price formation of higher order capital goods is that in capital goods, it's not only your input components like bolts, nuts, steel, glass, seats, tires, what have you, in order to arrive at a tractor. You know, the enterprise from the entrepreneur consists more than an inventory full of stuff. He needs skilled workmen to put it together. He needs an accountant to keep the books. He needs plans, but he also needs capital. So he needs to purchase capital, or but obviously he hasn't amassed enough capital. He needs to borrow some capital, and that capital is another input. It is not on the end level
In the basket, input basket.
but it is part of the inputs that he would need. Yes.
All this stuff is financial and it's great. But what the professor calls a pipeline, an engineer would call a black box. You take stuff in and you transform it to some other stuff coming out. Basket of input, basket of output. So your thesis is that the efficiency of the black box or its operation is affected by interest rates, by education level of people, by human resources, innovation, inventor. They all make this tractor manufacturing process more efficient, basically, or less efficient.
More efficient.
Well, hopefully, yes. But some of the interest rate inputs can make it less efficient if the cost of capital goes up.
Oh, yes.
So the spread that is profitable is not strictly determined by the spread, but by what losses there are in this black box. If it can survive on a 5% spread, or if it can only survive on a 10% spread. So by by changing the parameters of the black box, it's able to take advantage of different spreads. It becomes more or less efficient. And I thought that was very interesting. That I don't know if anybody felt the earth shake. I did when he said the income tax shifted the playing field. If you accumulate capital with no income tax, you got an advantage to those who accumulate with income tax. Obviously, it was easier. And as the income tax grows over years and years, this gets worse and worse. And I consider it as sort of the flip side of destruction of capital with the falling interest rates. As the interest rates continue going down, more and more capital is destroyed. And out of the gate, you can't even accumulate capital because taxes are increasing. And all this stuff, this tax, for example, affects the efficiency of the black box. And of course, the cost of capital affects it.
You have hit the nail on the head. If you are saying that taxes are an insidious form of slavery, I would say yes.
Why is, I think Singapore, 85% of the people living there are millionaires because they keep 90% of what they earn. And this translated into not just being rich, but having capital available to do all this stuff.
Is that true?
I don't know. Is that?
Anybody?
I don't
I
think.
don't know.
There's a few relatively free, low tax venues. People are generally getting rich over, as the age goes on, they get to keep what they earn or whatever. And this compounds.
Yeah.
Well, let's not take tax. Adding taxes adds another layer of complexity. If you say that interest, what I've said was that in your black box, it is essential that the input that comes in, and one of those inputs is the price of capital. It's not only the price of tires, but the price of capital is also an input.
Yeah.
And that needs to be absolutely stable, because otherwise it will wreak havoc.
With taxes, your black box has a leak. There's input going in, and some of it is not coming out. It's being sucked out by the tax.
Taxes, I consider a form of a parasitical element, and it is there because they have the guns, in essence.
Guns and badges.
And nobody in his right mind will pay taxes voluntarily. If they say so, I can refer them to a good psychiatrist. Obviously, taxes are exerted, but they are, taxes are there just to maintain another. I refer to this as a Hobbesian creature. You need to feed the monster. Unfortunately, well, that's another topic altogether, because this is complex enough. And I hope that I haven't stunned you, judging by the silence, because the formation of interest rates is relevant. It is topic of another course, but it comes in here because it is an input in the production of capital goods, producer goods. So that concludes what I had to say. Sorry for the furious pace I had to use, but you can actually find every word of the professor in his description of the hexagonal model. And of course the disequilibrium of price formation. You can Google that, you will find it. It's on top of the Google or the Yahoo results. You'll find it immediately. Thank you.
Let's have a coffee break and come back to the
Fine. Okay. I realize that in the previous session I had about 45 minutes to take you through a relevant but difficult topic, and it may or may not dawn on you what I have said, but the relevance is 100%. The relevance of interest rates is 100% when it comes to capital goods or consumer goods. Producer goods. The relevance is 0 when it comes to consumer goods, because in a consumer good you consume it. You do not need a certain life expectancy that you discount to the present in order to arrive at a price. But I've also been to lectures in college where I didn't get certain things, and I did my homework. Maybe a bit unfair if I said, well, tough, you need to go and read it. I cannot do anything different except take some questions if you have them, and take a lower speed and a lower pace this time. Keith.
Question. Can you talk a little bit more about the relationship, who the inventor is in the relationship with the annuitant? I didn't quite understand why a working person would be contracting directly with an inventor.
Right. Please understand, these are roles. Could be different persons, but they could be the same person. And I'll explain this again, because has everybody got this?
Yeah.
I can write it again anyway. We have the annuitant in the bottom here. We have the inventor, and we have the entrepreneur. These are roles. Could be different persons, but when interest rates are 0, there is no person who would assume this role, except that the young, let's call him a subsistence farmer, or a fisherman, or a baker, in a subsistence economy where interest rates are 0, what does the young person do? If he can get away with it, he would save some time and try to think about a tool that would make his life easier. So that role will drop back on him.
Okay.
It is a role. But of course, when interest rates climb a bit higher, you may get specialist people. And then the young person here will assume the role of the inventor, and he will make a living out of this because he will get certain people to sponsor him. Not only one, maybe. I mean, who was Michelangelo in the 15th century?
Thank you.
He was a painter, he was an inventor, he was, he wasn't a farmer, for sure.
Right.
But he had several roles, and yet he lived. Where did he make his income from? Well, as time progresses, of course, he was a young painter. And as an older person, he became an inventor and what have you. He devised helicopters and machines. But due to the fact there was no capitalist available, there was no capitalist system, the plans of Michelangelo did not materialize. Otherwise, he would start a helicopter factory. Okay, I'm getting one step ahead there.
Right. My misunderstanding, my question just simply was, is it really the annuitant that would be providing financing to the inventor, or is it the investment banker and the annuitant? You know, I'm just thinking about the 30-year-old wage earner not being in a position to provide that kind of risk financing.
Okay, yes, really.
Maybe you think about it, it's the time factor. Just like the young guy is saving for his future and the wealth is built up, the inventor is doing stuff today that'll come into fruition down the road when he's finished. Then it will pay off. So he's working towards a future good. And the entrepreneur has cash right now to invest in the machine. Go. He's not talking about the future. And so it's the connection of the wealth on the right side of this chart. Both of them have wealth, or one of them has wealth and needs wealth, the roles. And on this side, the inventor doesn't need wealth, he needs income to support him while he's developing his investment, his invention.
Oh, okay.
Has that thing.
So it's not so much that he's going to the annuitant for the income, it's just that he's in a position of needing that income.
Yes, and that's what he meant.
And the entrepreneur doesn't need income, he needs capital.
Yes.
Okay, I get it.
Okay, good, thank you.
Exactly. In this,
Thank you.
I'm coming to you. The entrepreneur has, these people have capital. They don't. Remember I said earlier, they're net long of present wealth and they're net short of present.
Yeah, it just clicked.
Long of
Well,
future.
the entrepreneur doesn't necessarily have capital, he needs capital. The annuitant has capital. On the left side, the inventor doesn't need capital, what he needs is income. And the annuitant has income. So there's an analogy between the inventor and the annuitant, but not really a contractual relationship. They wouldn't really be engaging with each other, probably.
You can.
They can,
But it presumes this. Otherwise, when zero, this falls down.
Right.
Could be, could not be. There's nothing to prevent the retiree to convert some of his gold dollars into silver and then with a small silver coin go to the baker and purchase bread.
Right.
He this holds. But he can also be, at his old age, still be an entrepreneur.
Right.
He could be the owner of incorporated bakeries, which happens to be his son, but he owns them.
Right.
But not when interest rates, when interest rates are zero, it would be difficult to imagine. It wouldn't pay off. There is no interest rate, there is no dividend either. But he could be the owner of a miller or a mill, and he may have a windmill if we go back in time,
Well, your point is very well taken. During that era, the society was very stagnant. There was very little investment, very little entrepreneurship, and things didn't change.
Right after the collapse of the Roman Empire, for sure. Imagine.
Yeah.
Right up to 10 centuries later, 1,000 years later, until the 14th century, things calmed down and gold gold was in hiding because it was a stressful time and stresses were less and things became back to normal. Gold comes out of hiding, it goes into circulation again. Not that times were beautiful, remember the plague. Yes?
Maybe I'm not deeply in traditional economics, but I still don't get it. Why is it important that, or why is the inventor only working if interest is high? I'm not getting it.
Well, the importance of a system of exchange, that's basically the point of your question.
Maybe.
Well, they can't get capital because no one will lend it at zero.
Yes.
But they would love to
In
borrow
essence,
at zero,
yes.
but nobody would give it to them.
In essence, yes. Because now, here you have a specialist inventor, somebody who is, let's make it, well, Michelangelo would be a perfect example of habit, but a blacksmith is a person who works, but he's also, he can bend metal. Now, he can devise tools. In the old days, he was used by the kings, and if we introduce taxes, you know, we have to devise another person here who extracts money from somebody else. But he made a blacksmith devise armor for him and his horse in exchange for protection. Sounds of protection rackets. But the role of the blacksmith was also that of the inventor. He devised swords and what have you, a javelin but the role of the inventor at zero interest rate could be the same person, because I mean, you need a certain kind of exchange. These inventors will render their services. Now he hasn't got wealth, so he will actually need some kind of income. Take 25 people here who will each take 1/25 of their salary, pay to the inventor. He will make one invention for all of them. He can live. Take the entrepreneur. No difference from today. In exchange for their capital, he can expand his business. And he will give up part of the new wealth in exchange for income. This guy needs income. He has wealth. But here it's a bit more difficult to picture because they're short of wealth, but they are long of future wealth. They are devising tools. The blacksmith can devise a plow if he thinks long and hard enough. And they did. The inventor can make spinning machines, steam machines. Not now, he can't produce them right now. He needs, in the 3 years that he thinks of this, he needs income. But he is long of future income. It's difficult to explain and to grasp, and I'm a bit of a newbie here, but I hope is everybody with me here?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yes.
We'll do a very good job on this in a future course, but I'm very glad that you fitted it in, because at least people have a taste of I find this very exciting, the hexagonal market, because it all fills. I got suggestions from a seventh protagonist to this, and I said, who would that person be? That would, of course, be financial speculator. And I said, fine, you go ahead and work it out. That was 3 years ago. You're still working on it.
That's because he needs an annuitant to provide income.
That makes me think about what I just said about the taxing authorities, but let's make a generic name for taxing authorities. Everybody who makes a living from the fruits of somebody else's labor. That would be the parasite, it would be the seventh person. But that would not do justice to this model, because this is a social justice model, because everybody delivers something in exchange for something else.
And nobody is stealing.
No stealing, there is a fair exchange at a fair rate, decided by all parties, at arm's length, if you like, if only to use tax jargon. Yeah. But the taxman is not fair. Yes.
Well, I don't know, I would maybe disagree to a small point because the one who has capital, I mean, I could have also inherited or got it somehow, and I put my capital to work for me, to receive interest. But me, I'm not interested if the entrepreneur, what is he doing, whatever, I don't care as long as I get my interest back. I'm not interested in the way he conducts business.
But he still has a valuable product to exchange for his capital, wherever it came from. It's still a valuable product that needs to go out into the market for the market to do well.
Make no mistake, this new tenant with a T has accumulated, of course, his own fruits of his labor during his lifetime. But he adds that to the gold of his father and his grandfather, because it accumulates. He doesn't give that up, because the gold bond, make no mistake, the bond is repayable at maturity. So he gets his gold back. He doesn't lose any gold, in fact he makes more.
But does he bear any risk at all, or is he risk-free at all this? I mean,
Did you ever
interested in the way the entrepreneur is doing business? Because if I just give money and don't care, I know that the next year I'm going to have 5-10% more.
Do you know of anything that is risk-free besides speculation in present day? What? I don't know nothing. I mean, guarantees come with washing machines, but I don't know nothing that's risk-free. Even in the old ancient Roman times, and I'm coming to you, there was an old saying where the legislator, or at least the developed rules of society, would say, leave your trust where you have left it, or find your trust again where you have left it. There's no such thing as zero risk. Of course, the reputations of people.
What's the risk of the investment banker here? He always makes a profit, right?
The investment banker is at risk of losing his reputation. Because, well, first of all, he needs a good reputation, otherwise nobody will trust him with business. But, of course, a reputation is what you build up over time. So he needs to have some capital of his own, make sure that he is a good investment banker by not mismatching maturities and go out of business and lose everybody else's money. He needs to be
cheating.
Correct. If he cheats, he loses his good name. And make no mistake, today's world, maybe this is crazy, this sounds crazy, like, we just start another business, give it another name. No. There is some kind of social control. We know that Mr. XYZ is behind this business, and he's gone out of business several times. We will not trust him with our money. His reputation is at stake. And the risk is reduced by everybody who you cannot eliminate risk. Really, you were first.
I'd like to address your first question. And if you look back in history, before this was developed, only the bottom part existed, really. And generally, this was an in-family situation. The father had the wealth, and the younger ones worked, for example, the farm. Now, the protagonist who came in, this banker, investment banker, made it possible to extend this type of setup to third parties. And you're exactly right. You don't need to know who was the entrepreneur, who was the inventor. You don't care, because someone else is taking care of that role. If there was no investment banker or capitalist, then you would have to take on that role. That role is compressed to the first level. And this way it's expanded. And how many inventors do you know? How many, what I'm saying? You can't know all the ones in the world. But some specialist makes it his job to find out who these inventors are, who these entrepreneurs are.
Matchmaker.
Brings them together, yes. Say it again, please?
Matchmaker.
Matchmaker, yes, or a market maker in investment, or a market maker. This is a legitimate value-added role. So any profit he makes is clearly dependent on the value he adds. It's not being extracted. It's voluntarily chosen.
If the merchant banker, matchmaker in the gold bond market, has any sense, he will refrain from making loans with other people's money to princes and kings. History provides a very good example. Take the downfall of the Medici Bank. Sandeep, you have read the book. Obviously the professor also, but most loans from merchant bankers to kings and bishops, popes, went afoul and causing downfall of the entire bank, and of course bankrupting several people here. So the reputation and the risk all comes to the central point. That I mean, you need some kind of mechanism, and but the responsibility of those people is also very huge.
And don't make loans to warmongers.
Which would be the same in the case of the Pope and the kings in those days. Yes, warmongers are. I mean, that would be a total waste. Yes.
Yes. One comment and one question. Comment. That sounds to me like I'm not sure if it's Menger or Bastiat, but that an economy an economy cannot consist of more services than it cannot produce more services than it receives.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's fictitious or
Remember the feedback element?
Or cheating.
Yeah.
Comment. Question. Going back to your sticker price on the tractor.
Yes. My favorite.
I accept that a change in interest rate will change the value of the tractor. Upon I understand time, value of money, and all that. But what I didn't like about your explanation, and here's my question, is it seems to assume that farmers were rational buyers. And that's one thing that I think this whole theory of financial economics or whatever, everything's assumed to be rational. We're all rational consumers and rational investors.
Can I just
right?
have answering that?
And so obviously the farmer is not rational necessarily in that sense. So what's your answer?
There's always room for exception, but if you're nutty enough to pay more, you mean,
But it would not be rationally obvious to a farmer that because the interest rates have gone up, that the present value of the future output of that tractor is worth less.
Don't underestimate farmers.
Can I take a second answering?
But I get your point. Okay, let's go. Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of people are not rational in business and entrepreneurs and so forth. The market tends to have a solution for them, which is their capital tends to be transferred over. They destroy some of their capital and the rest is transferred over to others that are not as foolish. So if some farmer makes the mistake of overpaying for tractor because it's shiny and the guy bought him a nice steak dinner with alcohol, then 3 years from now when he's struggling and he's he's behind on his payments, the bank takes it over, and then someone else who's who's more financially sophisticated ends up owning the used tractor and the land. That's it.
Yes, I started out by saying don't underestimate the farmer, and I will get to that, because farmers are not necessarily mathematically inclined to think that way, but we shouldn't underestimate them because we don't know. And today's farmer certainly is a businessman. Maybe not in those days or in the past. But the market tends to punish, to dish out punishment. And that is certainly, that will not have escaped anybody.
The interest rates can move again,
and this,
move down during the life of the trade.
and this is an insidious process. Under stable, I mean, the old farmers were longer in business because they didn't care about interest rates. They shouldn't have, because they were stable. And this is now the insidious process of capital destruction through the back door.
I think if your farmer has to borrow the money to buy the tractor, it's more immediately obvious to him that it's going to cost him more. But if the farmer is cash buyer,
then that makes no difference, because he has opportunity costs with his cash. Shall I buy the tractor, or shall I put the money for the tractor somewhere else to make a return? And then, I mean, both have a return, the tractor and the bank account, if you can call it this way.
but for the producer, the tractor has not lost value.
That's what he thinks.
Well, you could argue that it's actually increased in value.
Here's the question, what's the
I cannot
value,
Explain why.
what's the price of the tractor when the Fed drove down interest rate to zero?
Right. Well, that's the other, that's where I was leading up to.
Coming from Professor Fekete, this is a trick question. Well, I didn't think of this, and let's give it a thought. If the interest rate would be zero, I would be inclined to say there's no business.
It is zero, so there's still...
Well, today, but we're not under a gold standard. Okay, with the Fed, we're talking about payment. Well, mathematically, the price of a tractor would be the cash flow discounted now at zero interest rate, which would give me an infinite price here, a non-existent price.
Well, the tractor is a finite life though, so it's not, if you're, it's a 10-year
Well,
life.
the tractor can only work for 1 million years, so that would be contained. But you cannot arrive at a net present value for that tractor due to the fact that in your mathematical formula there is a zero. Basically, my answer would then be any good guess. We lose our ability to count.
Can I just interject here and say that the gentleman on my left is going to explode if he's not allowed to speak? So.
Okay.
I'm getting really worried.
Think about the back of the farmer and his irrational decision. Let's suppose he has already bought the tractor. Then he's caught up in this, whatever, price going up, price going down, he's got the tractor. The only difference is
the interest rate going up?
yeah, any capital destruction that takes place, he's actually in it. If he has not yet bought the tractor, he will either know that this is happening or not. If not, he'll buy the tractor and he'll be in the same shoes. So I think that's all it is. He doesn't do all this calculation, what you said, but he's going to be caught in it anyways. He will, without knowing what he's getting into, go and buy that tractor at the wrong price because the sticker price hasn't changed. Am I in the right place when I say this to you? Does that answer it?
Well, that doesn't add anything to me.
Well, it's a misallocation of capital. Because, you see, so whether you've already allocated the capital or not, it's obviously a big step. But if you're not aware that you're misallocating, you're misallocated anyways, because you're not totally rational.
Could you perhaps once more explain why within falling rates capital is destroyed in the first place?
That's a whole lecture.
That's another lecture.
Well, it is, except, think of a bond, if you get a 10% bond at $100,000 face value, it brings $10,000 cash flow. A 5% bond brings a $5,000 cash flow. So interest rates go from 10 to 5, the cash flow of that bond is still at 10 because it's already booked. So a new bond holder or a new bond buyer would have to buy a $200,000 bond to get the same cash flow. So the market value of this bond of the old bond changes to match the interest rates. That's the seesaw effect. Is that clear? Is that okay?
Yeah, the value is inflated.
Yeah, so whoever has bought the old bond, whoever sold the old bond is paying this high rate. and the new competitor will be able to compete on an uneven playing field.
I'm very curious to my exam question about the zero interest rates and the price, because actually you put a good question, but I don't know the answer except that I have to answer don't know if a good price.
If the interest rate goes up, what happens to the price of the sticker or the value of the tractor?
Well, you need to take the same amount of productive life and discount that to if the interest rate goes down, up to a new lower net present value of that useful life. Basically, the farmer overpaying for the useful life would be full, but the sticker price will be driven down.
Down. One word answer. So if the interest rate goes up, then the price of the tractor goes down.
Should be driven down, yeah.
Now, if the interest rate goes down, the value of the tractor goes
It should go up, but there is a problem.
What is the problem?
The problem is not. The problem is that interest rates are one pressure, but it is. Well, I mean, it's not you to decide to go for a higher price. It would be somebody else's, because I mean, who purchased this? The end user. The end user buys it.
I'm going to cash flow and present value and so on will give you the answer.
Yeah.
The price of the tractor is bound to go up.
Yeah.
So if the rate of interest goes to zero, the value of the tractor goes to infinity.
Which cannot be.
Which it cannot be.
No, that only assumes the tractor has an infinite lifespan. If the tractor has a 10-year lifespan, it's not infinity. It's income for each of 10 years, and it's a finite series that ends.
It's only valid for perpetuity.
So if the tractor produces $10 of income per year and has a 10-year lifespan, it's 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 100.
I know.
Period. Right? Am I missing something?
Well, yeah, no. But it's the price. The price would be a good guess because you cannot pay an infinite amount.
I'm saying it would be $100 in that case.
Which would be the added series.
Yeah, the series which is a finite series, not an infinite series.
Yeah.
What this example tells me is that zero interest rate is a contradiction.
Just as well, I mean, even with very, very low, nearly zero interest rates, you know, you would think that farmers would say, wow, this is an opportunity of a lifetime, I'm buying a second combine and a third combine and more land, and I mean, it's, as you say, they cannot be fooled. Farmers are no fools. We shouldn't underestimate.
I'm not underestimating the farmer at all.
Natural selection.
In fact,
a smarter farmer.
Quite the contrary.
Oh yeah.
Which was kids.
But also, I mean, even if they are not mathematically minded, you don't need a mathematician to come to the same conclusion. You know, interest rates are dropping. Why should I buy now or invest now? Wait 6 months. See what it does now.
No, sorry, your interest rate was rising.
Well, in the case of lowering interest rates, you would be induced to purchase more equipment, but they're not.
You don't have to be mathematically minded, because the question is this: production from the factor, additional production, getting amortized the cost, but at zero interest. I mean, it's very easy to beat. So, you know, the incentive should be there to buy that tractor. And yet it's not happening.
Yeah.
So you know, you can't make people, you cannot fool all the people all the time.
Pushing on a string.
That's exactly it. I haven't got a watch here. What's our time limit?
It's going to be 12.
20 to 12.
Okay, then.
So, thank you. And
No, thank you.
Come back at 2:30 for, I'm going to give a lecture on the, what is it,
Defensive strategy?